This night was badass, but...
Rewind, Recap, Relive. For over 50 episodes, the revolutionary force in wrestling interview.
Jonah, Rewind, Recap, Relive here. First in-person interview with the one and only Paul London.
Oh, cool. Thank you. I'm glad we were able to actually do this and in person. As I said, I probably wouldn't have figured out the Zoom thing, so this is good.
I hate the Zoom thing. Yeah, no, this is perfect. We're here at the big event, and it's completely closed, but it was a lot of fun. A lot of fun in Brentwood, New York. My alma mater, actually, I found out.
So cool that you graduated in this very facility. Like, when you told me that, I thought, because when I walked in here, I thought, this is really impressive. And everything was so busy, we didn't really have a chance to walk, or at least I didn't have a chance to really walk around and explore too much. I didn't even make it to the other side of the venue. But when you told me you graduated from here, I thought, wow, that's how fitting.
And I came right back. And there's wrestling here this time. Well, Paul, I do the cafe with you and our great friends James and
Wonderful addition.
Renee Dupree. I love it. It's so much fun. But for some reason, I just did a quick search, and I did not know that you actually made your debut. Is that true, against Brock Lesnar for the WWE? That never came up, and Brock is one of my favorites, but I've never been in there with him, and I don't know if how you feel about Brock. How was it making your debut against Brock Lesnar?
If you're looking for great Brock Lesnar matches, this is not one of them. But I remember we were in, I think, Hartford, Connecticut. I could be wrong. Either which way, I was doing a series of house show matches on the road, which is usually how they kind of start to integrate you from developmental, because I was at OVW at the time. Then they bring you up and you start doing matches on the house shows, and they might use you for a dark on TV, they might not, whatever. So I was doing house show matches and then also dark matches, mostly tagging with Brian. And then we got to, I'm going to go with Hartford. We got to Hartford, and this is before the dress code, mind you.
Oh, what's the...
Well, so at the time there was like, you just show up as you are. And I wasn't dressed like a slob, but I was just dressed kind of like an athlete. And I remember Arn Anderson comes up to me. He's like, "You know what you're doing tonight?" I was like, "No." And he was like, "Big night for you. You got one with," like, he told me, he was like, "You got this pre-tape with Vince and Sable." And I was like, "Oh, me? Okay." And he was like, "Then you got Brock." I was like, literally looking for the hidden camera, man, because it was just so out of nowhere. At the moment, because I wasn't sure, but there was a thread of something in this. So what it was weeks prior, Brian had done something in like catering where they were doing like a food fight, and he ended up getting chocolate syrup all over like Vince's suit. And Vince basically threw him to the wolves, and he got like slaughtered by Brock Lesnar, and he was off TV for a few weeks. So fast forward to this match, mind you, this is how ridiculous these segments are. I'm a local guy from Hartford, Connecticut. This is my hometown. They said it had to be my hometown, which I got that changed as soon as I could. Sorry, nothing against Hartford, but ATX. And so the segment was Vince and Sable are in Vince's office, dressing room, whatever the fuck, and there's a knock, and I just walk in, or he's like, "Yeah," or something, and I walk in. Like, how lax is security
Right.
when a seemingly local, non-contracted nobody can just walk up to Vince's office door and knock and just walk on in. And he's like, "What the hell do you want?" or something. He like says something, and I'm like, "Oh, my name's Paul London. I'm from Hartford. I'd really love to wrestle." And he's like, "Wah." And he's like, "You know what?" Or he's like, "Get out of here. Like, how dare you?" It's some bullshit. But it was like so weird because It's like the first thing I'm doing, and it's with Vince and Sable. Like, how much bigger does it get than that in terms of status, right? And so it was just so surreal. But Arn Anderson, I remember earlier in the day, he's like, "You're gonna wear that?" And I was like, "Yeah, what? Come on, what?" You know. And so I went across the street to some like Brooks Brothers or some. We were downtown, and it was like some department store that was way too expensive for my budget. But what choice did I have? Because I had like no time, and I bought some outfit that I never wore again. And anyways, long story short, Brock's like, "You know what? Actually, you are gonna have a match tonight." Yeah. And he's like, "And it's gonna be with Brock Lesnar for the world title." And I'm like, "Oh God, right?" And he's like, "Wow, you'll be the champion. Like, it has a nice ring to it. WWE champion." And like, it's so weird now that I think about it, thinking back on it, because it was all downhill from there. But yeah, so then I went out and Brock was cool, and I went out there with Arn, and we went over some stuff, and you know, I think when Brock understood that I was completely willing to lend myself to whatever he wanted to do, then there became a respect there, believe it or not, and I was like, he was like, "Yeah, what if you lure him with the belt, and then you catch him with the clothesline cheap shot?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, if he does that, you know, I could 360 and really." He's like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah, I could do that." He's like, "Oh shit, cool." And so that kind of impressed him, but man, that F5, like, he hits hard too, and like that F5, there are certain things in wrestling where, for the most part, you can kind of time your fall. It sounds weird, but like if I take a clothesline or a tackle or a drop kick or something where I'm taking a bump in the ring, you can typically time your fall. Like, and it just becomes second nature. There are certain things that happen, whether you're coming off the top rope or whatever, where maybe your timing is a little more difficult to get to that point of impact, because that's when you kind of have to kind of tense up your core and, you know, so on and so on. It's all a matter of protecting yourself. But so that F5 though, that was like the closest thing I've ever been to being in a tornado.
Wow.
Like, I was completely discombobulated because I was so light compared to this. I mean, this guy's a freak of nature, right? Like, he could tear down a barn with his own hands. He probably has and like rebuilt it, right? Because he's like, "I didn't like it." But and then I was so dizzy, and he like threw me out. He pinned me, he throws me out of the ring, and I like landed in the ropes because I was still all kind of just messed up. So then he goes to F5 me into the ring post, and Brian comes in from out of nowhere and pushes him into the ring post, and he drops me. I'm all fucked, and then he picks Brian up, and he grabs Brian and like beels him into the ring post, and it's on the floor. They're on the floor, and he just grabs him and like throws him. Brian takes this jumping back bump up against the ring post. It's still one of the sickest bumps I've ever seen. And yeah, that was my debut. So then next thing you knew, weeks later, we were teaming on Velocity and, you know, whatever, and they were looking at us that way. But yeah, that was and ever since, you know, Brock and I were always on like a cool like nod and, you know, have a chuckle and like whatever, and he didn't really do that with too many people, so I always kind of took that as like a real cool kind of badge of honor, or a badge of acceptance, especially so early on. You know, it's like if you can win over the most vicious bull in the stable, then like you know, that's a good spot to be in. Not that it really did a lot for me, but like so much of having success or longevity in the wrestling business is, do you have the respect of your peers, and have you earned your stripes, and have you paid your dues, and so many of these things that, you know, someone who goes up and you know, moves forward in the wrestling business and grows in the wrestling business, doing a lot of these things kind of the quote unquote traditional way, you know, driving hours upon hours. I mean, that was one of the things. Growing up in Texas, so many of my matches were hours and hours away, right? I remember doing a show in Dallas one night, and then I was in, like, Edinburgh, Texas, down in the valley, and that was a 10-hour drive overnight. When we were doing Ring of Honor, We were driving from San Antonio to Philadelphia. That's a 30 to 40 hour one way. So that's a 60 to 80 hour round trip. And we're doing that all in a weekend. And I was going to college full time. And that was brutal. When the hunger and the desire are there for the right reasons, none of that matters. None of that matters. I lived in my car. I've slept in my car after WWE, believe it or not, at certain points. I'm not above it. It is what it is. You know what I mean? You make some choices that go south, and life throws you some shit that like maybe you just couldn't have seen coming, and it is what it is. But what's it to you? You know what I mean? But a lot of those things in terms of paying your dues establish, well, not only a grit, but a discipline, or respect for the craft, or respect for yourself. It helps you stay humble, I think. You know what I mean? As opposed to like somebody who won a contest or a reality show or something. Nothing against the Tough Enough guys, but everyone has their own path. But in the traditional sense, that's kind of the way it was, and that's how I came up. And I was brought in at, I had a failed training experiment when I was 16 in Florida with Exotic Adrian Street. And he basically ripped me off, and yeah. And then I didn't really get into a good training program until I was 19, 20. Till I was about 19. In 2000, I had picked colleges all over the country to find, and all the colleges that I picked out of high school, I made sure there were wrestling schools nearby, because that was my big plan. I was like, well, I'll have the room and board taken care of, and I could go to training. It made sense in my head. So I ended up at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, and I was going to train with Shane Douglas and Dominic DiNucci at the House Hardcore 2 in New Brighton, Pennsylvania, just outside of Pittsburgh. And the second I got up there, Shane Douglas had torn his bicep, and so all the training was off. So I had no choice but to go to class. And that was the only time I ever made the dean's list. Believe it or not, I was a 3.9 GPA.
That's awesome. That's what I had here.
Is it really?
3.9,
See, we're part of an elite group. We're elitists. I could go on and on, but like, long story short, I got broken in by Ivan Putski, the Polish Power. I then went on and trained with Rudy Boy Gonzalez, who was one of the head trainers at Shawn Michaels Wrestling School. I then went to California, where I met Chris Daniels, and I learned a lot from him, as well as Tom Howard, Aaron Aguilera, who's still a really good friend of mine as well. All these guys are. Then I went out to Florida with Dory Funk Jr. He trained me as well, showed me so much, helped me more than, it's hard to say one person helped me more than the other, because they all helped establish these bricks in the wall of building something, but through Dory, I met Terry, and Terry was another one of my mentors. And Dory was the reason I first got a look from WWF and WCW. Funny enough, I was on the last WCW pay-per-view ever, and I was featured on the last, or not featured, but I was in the last WCW Thursday Night Thunder, and I might have appeared on the last Nitro as well, as a plant in the crowd for all these. Yeah, it's pretty funny. One's a contract signing with Booker T, and I get beat up by Steiner, like as a security guard, and then another one I'm like a fan planted in the crowd during like DDP and Steiner, and I get pie-faced by Steiner, and like I give DDP like a pie pan or something that he hits him with, like a record or something. It was ridiculous. And then through Dory, he had set up through his relationship, because Dory was the trainer at Trax, which I think was the original wrestling training compound in Stamford. He was the head trainer. So he had lots of ties with the office. But anyways, he had set up a series of house show matches for one of his prized student, this kid Adam Windsor, who's since passed away, unfortunately, because we were tag champions at Wildside for a while. But either which way, Adam was going to have matches on 3 nights of house shows against different guys from the camp, and I was on the last night. So I actually made my WWF tryout debut, whatever you want to call it. It was with WWF, and it was at a house show in Fort Myers, Florida. And the match was designed for him, but I ended up shining out of that as the heel, and that put me on the radar. And then I soon on was getting calls from like Kevin Kelly, and I did the match with Perry Saturn for Jacked Metal, and that same thing I did with Brock, where I was like, whatever you want to do, I'm game. And he's like, what if I do this? I'm like, well, I could really do this. He's like, really? Oh, and Perry was just amazing. Yeah, he was great. So
I hope he's doing well. I know I saw he fell on like hard times in the last few years, but
what we do to our bodies is it's not natural. Like, we're insane. We're certifiably insane. We're masochists. I mean, this stuff's not. And you think of the rings that a lot of these old timers came up with, and they're death traps compared to this shit today. But, you know, any chiropractor that's a real chiropractor will tell you that anytime we take a fall on our back, it's the same impact as getting hit in a car with a fender bender.
oh my god.
Bam. So if you think about it, you're taking like upwards of 10 to 15, maybe more of those in a 10 to 15 minute span, sometimes less. That's not good for the human body at all. So that would be my plea to WWE is they have this, I don't know if they still have it, but they used to have this bullshit. Any wrestler who's ever been under contract here has drug rehab for life. It was like a total PR scam bullshit, right? Well, they wouldn't need drugs if they got free physical rehab for life. So if you actually care about your talent, set up physical rehab for your talent instead of just offering drug rehab, because drug rehab is the problem's already happened. And you can avoid the addiction to drugs if you help them with their bodies. That's what really is caring about them, not just like, oh, we're doing this. And then if you look up, sadly, the case of Steve Bradley, he was under developmental for a while. And apparently the reason Steve Bradley never quite broke through is because a lot of people thought he looked too much like Van Damme and worked too much like Van Damme. But he was of that style. And he took them up on their drug rehab thing, I think, like twice. And I could be wrong with this, and I apologize if I mess it up. But sadly, you know, I think he tried to go a third time or something, and they denied it to him. They're like, no, like, we've already tried to help you out. And he ended up taking his own life. Yeah. So it was just, you know, it's just there's so many, yeah, it's tough, you know. It's tough. So, yeah. Sorry to put this on a downer.
Not at all.
Get some physical rehab if you really care about people. Jesus.
I mean, I think that's a great plea, and like, you know, a lot on this show, I have a lot of rising stars who are like, and a lot of the veterans say exactly what you're saying. You know, just like be safe with your body, take care of your body, because that is your business. And a lot of the advice that I feel is like mainly given. To parlay into a spot you did that's very well known, that I'm curious if this had any lasting toll on your body. I'm sure I've heard you talk about it on Kayfabe, but the Royal Rumble elimination that looked incredibly vicious with Snitsky, what was that like for you? I mean, that.
Yeah, I first of all, I was just like really excited to be a part of the Royal Rumble, because that was my favorite pay-per-view when pay-per-views really mattered, and there was only 4 of them a year, you know. But the market's become so oversaturated in a sense with too much material, and that's why so much of it looks the same, because it is. And so back when there were 4 pay-per-views, the Royal Rumble was always my favorite, because I got introduced to professional wrestling through magazines. I never watched it on TV. I was aware of it, but I didn't actually pay attention to it and get like lured, I should say, into it until I saw, I want to say, the 1991 either January or WWF magazine with Hulk Hogan on the cover, and he's like clutching an American flag, and it has coverage of the Royal Rumble, which he won. And so I was trying to make sense of what I was looking at as I was looking at these still images of these gladiators, these colorful, glistening, muscular gladiators. That sounds so weird. But So then, but I was fixated on it. I was just like, oh my God, I was transfixed on this thing. And so then that was my real introduction to it, was through magazines. And yeah, I just was hooked. It was like I was obsessed with it, obsessed with it.
The Royal Rumble was an amazing. Yeah. No, I mean I love that too.
Yeah, but so the Rumble was like the first thing I was looking at and trying to make sense of it, because they were covering that, and I was just like, what is happening? And you kind of make sense of it. You see a guy getting dumped over and like trying to hold on, and you're like, oh, I think. Different, but like through pictures, you could the photography is just phenomenal. I wish I knew who the photographer was back then, but I was able to really make sense of what I was seeing because of the images. Almost like a very slow flip book, and so that was my event. So when I was able to be a part of it, I was just amped, super amped. So then we get into like the meeting, and they start going over like the order of going in, and like who's getting eliminated and by who and stuff. And I don't know what my ideas were, but I thought, maybe I'll like get eliminated by Sean or Cena, or like, you have these delusions. So then I was getting eliminated by Snitsky, and Gene's a friend of mine, but at that time they had kind of given up on him as like a guy they were pushing, and I thought like, okay, well then what does that say about me? You know what I mean? If I'm like the glowing cruiserweight representative who won this cruiserweight elimination match to qualify and become a Rumble entrant, so I'm the representative. What does that say about that? So I was like a little miffed at it. So that's when I started thinking, and I thought, well, I've never been a fan of lazy eliminations. You know what I mean? Where it's like, time to go, whoa, or like, whoa, to the floor, slow. Just like, come on. So in 2020, Jesus, in 2000 and 2001, I was going to college in San Marcos, Texas, at Southwest Texas State. It's now just Texas State. And there's Sewell Park, which is like the big, beautiful park on the campus in San Marcos. It's like 30-40 minutes south of Austin. And there's this giant river that runs through the middle of Sewell Park. And there's this concrete kind of sidewalk, and there's a lot of space, but it's just amazing. You can go snorkeling, and it's all a natural spring. It's amazing. People are laying out in the summertime. So anyways, during the summers, I would go and I would do that running shooting star off the side of the wall into the river, because there was like a 5-foot drop between the edge of the thing down into the, it was pretty deep too, and the water was like at least like 6 feet. It was awesome. Loved it.
Awesome.
So I would.
Did you land?
No, I would kind of land in kind of like a dive, or even if I did kind of belly flop it, it wasn't bad. No, so like that, the whole movement was something I was capable of doing already. In TNA against, I want to say, Chris Sabin, I had an X Division title match. He was the champion, I was the challenger, and it made sense to me that I could do that off the apron. So there's a spot in that match, and this is in Nashville, this is the only place I ever did TNA was in Nashville. There's a spot in there where I did the running shooting star, and it's kind of like a running shooting star clothesline off the apron. So I did the running shooting star into like a flying clothesline onto him. He's standing on the ground. So so I did it then, and then I was like, oh, okay, I can do this. That was cool. Never had tried it before, but I just knew it was the same footing, like the same footwork as going off my stronger foot. And so I just thought, well, I can do that. Yeah, if he lines me, that could start the rotation. Yeah, and it started making more sense to me. And I thought, well, this could be a cool elimination. So then I got with Gene, and I thought, let's do something like this. And he was like, are you sure? I was like, yeah. And I cringe watching it. Just, there's a moment of hesitation that it disgusts me. Where like, I kind of almost like pop up like a gopher, and I'm like, it's like, I think for me it was getting my timing with him, but there's a moment of reset where I land on the apron and then I pop up. It's like I'm on his back and then like he flips me over and Taz is like, hang on, London. And I'm like hanging on. I get up on the apron and we get up and like I pop up and I'm like,
Right.
and then like throw it, right? Like what am I doing at that moment, right? Just waiting to see what this guy's gonna do. Like I'm like about to die. But they're like I pop up like a gopher and it's like, and then I duck under and I turn around and it's like wham, and then like yeah, he just murders me. And they knew what I was gonna do. I told them because they wanted to know what everything was gonna be, right? Because they didn't want to lose a big elimination or something spectacular, right? If it's lazy Jimbo, whatever, getting just thrown over, they can lose that, and it doesn't matter. But if it's something spectacular, right? And so they knew what I was doing. It wasn't like I just sprung it on them, like, oh yeah, you want me to get eliminated by Gene? Well, take this. And that there was some of that in that because it was like, all right, well, then Gene and I are gonna be the standouts of this fucking thing. Fuck you guys. And we did it, and I can't remember which ref rushed to me first, but it was fine. Their padding on the outside is the best padding. I mean, it was an impact, but I had so much fucking adrenaline that it was just, I'd done it before. And they're like, oh my God, are you okay? Are you okay? I was like, stay here. They're sending the stretcher. I'm like, what? Right. And they put me on a stretcher, and they did all these replays. Like, I didn't tell them to do that. They did it because they couldn't deny that it was something they had never seen before. So then I get to the back, and they're like, oh, you okay? And I popped up off the stretcher, and I was like, oh, it was awesome. And they were all kind of like, the hell, you know? And I was like, weird. Not that I was expecting all this praise, but it was like, I know y'all had never seen that shit before, you know what I mean? So I get to the back, and Pat Patterson was like, oh, my God, that was amazing. I was like, okay, that's more like it. He's like, that was spectacular. Oh, my God, oh, my God, oh, my God, that was the greatest thing I've ever done. And then Michael Hayes is like walking along. He's like, oh, Michael, oh my God, Michael, did you see that? And Michael Hayes like stops. He looks annoyed that we stopped him. He's like, yeah, I saw it. It was good, a little too good. And he walks off. I was like, what the fuck was that? And then Shane walks up. He's like, Shane, did you see that? Like Pat Patterson, bless his heart. He was like my biggest cheerleader in that moment. He's like, did you see? He's like, yeah, I saw it. And he like walked off. I was like, what the fuck is up these people's like, yeah. But it was just they sure as fuck weren't gonna top that. Come on, like, you know. So that's the kind of shit that just like would really get me really disillusioned with just being there. Like it would take all that gloss away where you're kind of like, oh my God, I can't believe this. Like this is so. And then something like that would happen. You just think like, what the. What do they want me to do? Yeah. Just throw some like, and now, and so like, and then I was off TV for a long time, and they acted so, I was like in the doghouse for it, and now.
We still talk about it.
They show it every year as if it's like Leitner's buzzer beater. You know what I mean? Like, every January, whenever the Rumble is, I get this stream of messages, and it's like, it's flattering. I'm very grateful for that. I mean, that's, but that's just, that also is a representation of how far I was willing to do, like what I was willing to do with my body for the sake of leaving some form of a stamp there, because I wasn't even getting peanuts, man. I was getting peanut shells for the most part. I was getting peanut shells. It was like, I'd always tell him, Brooklyn Brawler, Steve Lombardi, he was another one of my, was he here today?
Yeah, I saw him.
See, I didn't have time.
There was so much going on here, so many great stories, but Brooklyn Brawler was here with, I'm blanking on who he was sitting with. But, Harvey Whippleman.
Yeah, Bruno.
Yeah, right.
And I would always tell him, I'm like, I feel like a sports car that's just like garaged. Like they don't even let me, like, it just became so frustrating, but like that's something that I always stand. I'm very grateful people even remember that, and now it seems like there has to be some sort of just bonkers stunt thing, you know what I mean? I'm not saying I started that, but
Kofi King, right?
yeah, Johnny and like all that stuff. And so, in terms of spectacular eliminations, one of the first eliminations I ever saw that I thought was like, oh my God, like he murdered him, was I think it was Rikishi, but he was part of the Head Shrinkers, and this might have been the 92, the one that Flair won, I believe. If Undertaker was in that one, it was 92 or 93. The Head Shrinker, I think it was Rikishi, gets choke slammed by Undertaker, but Undertaker lifts him up for the choke slam and sits him on the ropes, and he flips back and his head just smacks the apron, and that's how he gets eliminated. And I was just like, oh my God, he murdered him. There's no, dude, it's one of the sickest eliminations that no one ever talks about, but Taker literally choke slams him onto the ropes where he sits on it and just flips back, and the back of his head just smacks the apron, and like, it's insane. And then I think to like the one in Madison Square Garden, sadly, with Taka Michinoku, where he got hurt really badly, but then it just seemed like, oh my God, this is starting to become like a spectacular thing, you know? And so again, I went to the Royal Rumble in 97 in San Antonio, when Shawn beat Sid. I was like 9th row at the Alamo Dome, and that's when I became a certifiable Steve Austin believer. I always liked Steve Austin, but then, like, you know, he cheated, he got eliminated, and he came back in and eliminated Brett, and he won the Rumble, and it was just like hearing his theme song in the Alamo Dome, and like the energy and like the fact that he got away with it, like it was just so cool. And like I was just wearing my Austin 316 shirt to high school, and no dates.
We get that. Yeah. We couldn't even wear wrestling shirts to school. This is no, different generation there. That's no. But that's so cool. Yeah, the Rumble is one of my favorite events too. Like, it was just always so different. Even though when I got into it, they did have the 12 events a year. Like, I think the first pay-per-view I ever ordered was Great American Bash 2008. Oh, wow. I think that was the first paper I ever got, but still, the Rumble, when it came around, always felt special. Yeah. I'm curious about someone, if you have any thoughts on this guy, who is now going up against, at Survivor Series, it's going to be The Miz and Gunther, and Miz was around, obviously, when you were there, and he kind of keeps reinventing himself and, like, making himself matter again. It feels like he's always there, but sometimes it'll be dormant, then he'll be like this and this. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on The Miz in general.
I mean, I like Mike. He obviously is very good at doing that, keep maintaining that form of momentum and keeping his beak wet. And so, you know, he obviously has a ton of charisma. You know, he's not a wrestler you're going to rewind and study. He never has been. But he does things really well, right? Maybe basing or catching somebody on a dive is not one of them, ever. But he's a very serviceable schmuck heel, you know. And who was the other name you mentioned? Yeah, and Gunther, I met Walter when he was at WXW, because I had done their 16-karat tournament years ago. This is like maybe 2018, maybe 2017 or 18. I did. There's this awesome company in Germany, WXW, and that's where a lot of these guys come from, you know. But Walter, I knew him as Walter, but yeah, he was menacing then too, and it was like, God, you don't want to take chops from that dude. And he was always very cool. No, thankfully, Jesus, I probably wouldn't be here right now. I'd still be recovering. Yeah. So, first person to ever leave a handprint on my chest from a chop. Believe it or not, was Necro Butcher. Yeah, chopped the shit out of me at a birthday party inside of a storage unit in Austin, Texas, in North Austin, inside of a storage unit. This is where the wrestling school was. And you could only hit the ring on, like, one, like, you could only run the ropes one way, because if you ran them hard the other way, you'd hit the wall. And we had a birthday party in this storage unit. There must have been, like, 11, 12 kids just standing there in front of the one side that they could stand in front of, and we had this a battle royal, because I was like, if you think about it, that's a very natural play thing. A lot of people have already done a similar battle royal as kids without realizing it. When you play King of the Mountain, or like, I loved the Rumble so much that me and my friends, even if it was just like two other guys, boys, we were young boys, we would each pick 10 wrestlers, and then we would be that wrestler, and we would come in and do the Royal Rumble like on their parents' like king size bed. Yeah. And then like play and get thrown off, and that's how you got to live. And then you would just come back as the next guy you had on your 10 list of 10 names.
Did you change outfits?
No, I wasn't that. I wasn't that creative, or I didn't have those kind of resources. But just that imagination, But like, that King of the Mountain kind of mentality, or that's something that we would do that on trampoline. I grew up on a trampoline. I loved it. I think it's one of the healthiest things that kids can do. Under supervision, because you can get hurt. I had a friend of mine, I had a birthday party at my house, this is probably in middle school, and when I woke up in the morning, I noticed one of my friends was gone, and I was like, what happened to, was his name Jonah? Anyways, he broke his arm.
I broke my arm.
Did you? No.
I did.
Jumping on a trampoline when it was wet at night?
Pulled me down
Oh.
So different Jonah.
Okay. Dang. Well, yeah. A few of my friends went out to jump on the trampoline at night after it rained, and they slipped and he broke his arm, and I woke up and he was gone. Well, whatever. Either way, the trampoline helped me so much as a kid, just with my aerial body control, and I mean, my neighbors must have thought I was a special child in a way, because if they looked out the window, like I could just imagine them washing their dishes, looking at the fuck's he doing? Like, because I would have my Hulk Hogan or Ultimate Warrior wrestling doll buddy, and I would have matches with them on my big round trampoline, and like I'd be like hitting myself in the face. Like, I mean, I gave them a lot of offense. Right. So like you just see this kid just hitting himself with a pillow and like landing on him and like all the yeah. No, I was super generous. Put him over. But then like, yeah. But you would play those games with your friends if you had a bunch of friends on the trampoline. You'd play like, throw people off the trampoline, and I don't know. You just roughhouse, man. We weren't indoors playing video games and doing all that kind of nonsense, which there's a place for that. But being, growing up a Texas guy, it's like if there's daylight, sunlight, you're outdoors.
Well, yeah, I love that. I did not become a wrestler, obviously, but I also dabbled in the backyard wrestling stuff, and it was very fun. Another one of those big four pay-per-views that's coming up is Survivor Series, and I'm curious if you just have any Survivor Series memories with it around the corner. Any fond Survivor Series memories?
I mean, nothing that comes off the top of my head that I was a part of. I don't even know if I was. I certainly wasn't in any kind of Survivors match. I don't have any personal Survivor stories, but in terms of just when I think Survivor Series and I close my eyes, I think of like the original theme song to the Survivor Series. It was like this saxophone. The Royal Rumble kind of had one too. See, that was the thing. When you only had 4 pay-per-views, each pay-per-view had its own in-house made theme song. And it was so of the times, this very early 90s, kind of like neon, Miami Vice, 80s, turning into the 90s, sexiness, saxophone. Like if you look up the old Royal Rumble theme song and Survivor Series theme song, I can't so much speak. SummerSlam had one too, and WrestleMania. But those two in particular, they had this like saxophone kind of thing. And those themes are so, to me, those are what made these things so rich, because it was just, it made it so special. And so the Survivor Series that really stands out to me is like when they had like the Ultimate Warriors against the Perfect Team. Because to me, it was just like, Mr. Perfect was my favorite wrestler of all time. Like, just, he was my hero. And I got to meet him one time in San Antonio at a SmackDown. And he was super cool, Kurt Hennig. So, but anyways, it was like Kurt Hennig, Mr. Perfect, and he just had like Demolition. It was like they were all in the black studs with the leather, and it was so badass. And he had like Ultimate Warrior
Visually.
and yeah. And I think it was Hard Foundation and Texas Tornado with Ultimate Warrior. And it's just like, this is, and then it was like the winners of that go on to the end where they had the Soul Survivors. And I'm like, this is Survivor Series. You know, throwing a little gobbledygooker there. Yeah. So, but you gotta have that sexy sax music.
I feel like I vaguely remember, like I do remember watching the old Royal Rumbles and having them just cycle through everyone who was going to be in it, which I thought was kind of cool because back then, no returns. I'm probably like early 90s when Vince would be like, catch Hulk Hogan, Iron Sheik, and he'd like, all of them would flash on the screen. Yeah.
It was badass, but they would play this in the background whenever they would like show the teams, and they would be cutting a promo in front of the green screen. They'd be like, "At the Survivor Series, we're gonna show you." Perfect. You know, and this would be kind of like low in the background. Tell me that wouldn't work in a Schwarzenegger action movie.
Oh, yes.
Right? Totally. The like the real Commando, the classic. Right?
All right, so now I'm gonna try and find the Royal Rumble one.
Yes.
Because that one was my personal favorite.
One final question that this all made me think of, actually, and it's if you have any, you don't have to answer it yet, but any interaction or memories of Howard Finkel? Because I love Howard Finkel.
He's the
personally.
He's the voice. He's the voice. He's my only voice. I mean, I hear Tony Chimmel at times just because I was with Tony Chimmel for so long, and I'm grateful for him as well. But anytime we were able to get Howard Finkel for any kind of announcement, it just was like really tying the knot on the dream. You know, it's like really tying the bow, I should say, the bow on the dream, because and Howard was just always such a class act, because he worked at the pay table as well sometimes in terms of like payouts and stuff like that, or helping with travel, and he was just invaluable, but as wonderful as a worker, but he was just an even sweeter guy. So that it was always a real pleasure. You know, you could be in the worst mood. You could like come to the building with still some personal shit you haven't gotten rid of yet, and you could be in a foul mood, and you see Howard, and like impossible for you to carry any of that towards him, because he's just so just a glowing soul. But to even have him hear my name mentioned from like out of his voice, like it's crazy. It's surreal, right? It's surreal, man. He's like the Elvis of commentators, in my opinion. He's the guy.
I think he's still the best. I think all of his stuff holds up. My mom, unfortunately, like she was very sick with cancer several years back, and at one of these cons, I had like chose to go to she was doing like a cancer run, and the con happened at the same time. I was maybe like 16, and I was like, let me go to the wrestling thing first, and I'll go to the drive. But I told Howard this when I was there. I don't know how we got on the topic, but he did like a video that I still have for her for the run, and was like, you know, Donna, like I'm wishing you the best of luck. Like it was literally the nicest thing any wrestler has ever
He's incredible.
done for me. And it was so sweet. It was I was very upset. Like I had no personal connection with him, but when he passed away, I was very upset.
Well, Mean Gene was another one, but Mean Gene, I didn't get to as much being around him, but that's just another one. It's like this is the promo, this is the guy, this is the guy. So very, very grateful for all my brushes with the guys I saw in my dreams and wanted to be a part of, and the reason I became a professional wrestler. I did find this.
Yeah. And it's like, let's take a look at who the entrances will be, and it would be like, Yeah, and they were like still images, and they were like, let's go and listen to Rick the Martel, who's president. He'd be like, at the Royal Rumble, I'm gonna show you all about Eric. You know, and they would cut back and it'd be like a couple more entrances, like still photos. And then they would cut to another pre-tape. It was awesome, but this would be playing in the background. You're like, this is the event. Like, this to me was my WrestleMania, was Royal Rumble. Totally.
I love that playing us out too. Yeah, this was very fun. Paul, actually, I do want to one more thing. Kayfabe Academy. Tell us about it, because that looks great, and I have a lot of rising stars on this show. So anything you'd like to say about Kayfabe Academy?
Kayfabe Academy. It's a wrestling school that I'm opening in January in Los Angeles area for beginners and for people who just want to see if this is for them. Experienced workers as well. So the idea behind Kayfabe Academy is to really bring the magic to your work and to take pride in what you do and take pride in the sacrifices that we all have to make to succeed and to move forward. So it's a never-ending journey, and any help that I can give to young hopefuls to get the light bulbs to go off, that's what Kayfabe Academy is all about.
That's perfect. Very concise and everything. Well, thank you, my friend. Thank you, Paul. This was so much fun. Finally on Rewind Recap Relive. I'm missing the tux, but this was great. All right. Thank you.
Relaxed.
More relaxed. Low key.
Rewind, recap, relive. For over 50 episodes, the revolutionary force in wrestling interviews.